U.S. President Joe Biden says he considers redesignating Houthi militia as terrorist organization. Hans Gramberg concludes visit to Riyadh after intensive discussions with Saudi and Yemeni officials aimed at de-escalation. Houthi mines continue to claim thousands of civilian lives in the country. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. The Houthi militia status seems to continue to be a topic of debate among American administrations. When Donald Trump officially labeled them terrorists in his last days, Biden revoked that designation just days after taking office. Yet, with the rebels being persistent to military escalation, this has pressured the President Biden to say on Wednesday his administration is considering redesignating Houthi militia as an international terrorist organization. The following report has more details.
U.S. President Joe Biden said his administration is considering redesignating Houthi militia as an international terrorist organization following drone and missile attacks on the United Arab Emirates claimed by the group. His comment at a news conference came shortly after the Emirati ambassador Yusuf Al-Otaiba urged the Biden administration to restore the designation in response to strikes on Abu Dhabi airport and a fuel depot. Joe Biden said that reigniting the group as a terrorist organization is under consideration, conceding that ending the conflict in Yemen is very difficult.
The answer is it's under consideration, and ending the war in Yemen takes the two parties to be involved to do it, and it's going to be very difficult.
Biden's comment reflected the lack of progress toward ending the war since he launched an initiative shortly after taking office a year ago to restart peace talks. 8 groups had complained that the terror designation, which limits interaction by U.S. entities, complicated humanitarian work in the country. As part of the initiative he launched last year, Biden appointed U.S. diplomat Timothy King as a special envoy. The State Department also reversed a last-minute Trump administration decision placing the Houthis on the U.S. list of foreign terrorist groups, subjecting them to financial sanctions. King began a new mission to the Gulf in a bid to reinvigorate the peace process and tamp down the surge in violence. The State Department said in a statement that he will press the parties to de-escalate militarily and seize the new year to participate fully in an inclusive UN-led peace process. Likewise, the United Nations envoy resumed his efforts to engineer peace talks starting from the Middle East. Aside from escalating violence in a region that has sought to turn the page on a decade of proxy wars, the exchange of fire could also cloud a series of high-level talks between regional and international foes. There are also indications that discussions between Saudi Arabia and regional rival Iran were beginning to bear fruit, but the unprecedented Houthi attacks in Abu Dhabi could throw a wrench into those talks. The recent violence seems to have the potential to exacerbate the humanitarian situation in Yemen and derail the nuclear negotiations in Vienna.
The Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Gramberg, concludes the visit to Riyadh today. He met with the Saudi officials and Yemeni politicians. Gramberg also had in-depth discussions with the P5. During his meeting, he announced the recent wave of military escalation that has engulfed Yemen and has spilled over the borders to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. He expressed great concern about the impact of this escalation on the prospects of peace in Yemen and the heavy toll it has taken on civilian lives and livelihoods.
Mr. Grunberg, the Special Envoy for Yemen, is still in Riyadh today, where he continues his discussions with senior Yemeni and Saudi officials on options for de-escalation. Mr. Grunberg has been in close contact with all sides and urges them to exercise maximum restraint and respect their obligations under international law. He also called on the warring parties to engage constructively with his office to facilitate the immediate de-escalation of violence.
The Directorate General of European Civilian Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations urged conflict parties to adhere to international humanitarian law and protect civilians during the ongoing hostilities. This comes at a time when violence in Yemen is escalating. On 16 January, a cross-border attack by Houthi militia was carried out against a fuel storage facility in Abu Dhabi and a construction site near Abu Dhabi International Airport. In retaliation, the coalition intensified its military operations in the country. The World Food Programme said that the nationwide average rate of inadequate food consumption in Yemen stands at 48%, which is above the very high threshold of 40%. In the World Food Programme's latest food security update, the organization indicated that the rate of inadequate food consumption remains notably higher in areas under the government's control, averaging 53%, in comparison to the healthy seized areas, which averaged to 46%. World Food Programme targeted 13 million people for general food assistance. Of these, 9.4 million people were targeted with in-kind food assistance, 2.3 million people with commodity vouchers, and more than 1.3 million people with cash assistance. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees announced the displacement of more than 1,200 families during the first half of January due to military escalation. In a brief statement, the organization said that more than 1,200 families fled their homes in the first 2 weeks of 2022, most of whom are from Hodeidah, Ma'rib, and Shabwa. The needs of the displaced are numerous and funding is very limited. In 2018, the government of Yemen and the Houthis concluded the UN-mediated Stockholm Agreement, in which they agreed on a ceasefire in Hodeidah to be overseen by a UN monitoring mission called UNMAHA. However, as of 2020, the implementation of the ceasefire is stalled, and the humanitarian situation has not improved. An Irish general has been appointed as the new head of the mission. What difference can the new head make in terms of monitoring the already dead Stockholm Agreement? This report has the answer.
Once again, the United Nations attempted to revive Stockholm Agreement by appointing the retired Irish Major General Michael Beery as head of its mission to support the Hodeidah Agreement. This comes at a time when Yemenis assert that UN leniency with Houthi militia has quashed the implementation ceasefire in Hodeidah and the siege on Taiz and releasing prisoners. Yemenis consider that the mission has failed to achieve any progress on the ground since its formation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced the appointment of Major General of Ireland Michael Beery as a replacement to the Indian General Abhijit Guha. Major General Beery has enjoyed a long career since joining the Irish Army as an infantry officer in 1975. He served as head of mission and commander of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon from 2016 to 2018. Beery served 10 years in overseas deployments including Afghanistan, Bosnia, Iraq, Somalia and Uganda. He is the fourth head of the UN mission in Hodeidah. He was preceded by the Indian General Abhijit Guha, the Danish General Michael Losgaard and General Patrick Camemert. They all resigned after failing to achieve any breakthroughs to support the implementation of the agreement. They were unable to achieve anything, as the mission remained neutral until now inside a ship chartered by the United Nations and docked in the port of Hodeidah under heavy guard of the Houthi militia, who restricted its movements, but the United Nations did not take any position toward these actions. In late 2018 and under great international pressure, joint forces held their advance to the port of Hodeidah after reaching a distance of no more than 4 kilometers. The government and Houthi rebels went to the Swedish capital Stockholm and agreed on a ceasefire, followed by a withdrawal from the two parties, and the local authority and police would secure the city and the port under the supervision of the United Nations. 3 years later, Houthi militia did not implement any of the agreement provisions. In a recent development, unilaterally, the joint forces redeployed their forces and withdrew from upon agreed sites reaching south of the governorate. Yemenis seem to have lost faith in an agreement which was violated since day one. Some observers have seen gone further to question, was Stockholm Agreement a monitoring of a ceasefire, or rather of a war?
In Aden, Osama al-Qusaybi, director of the Masan project, revealed that mines planted by the Houthi militia in Shabwa need 3 years of work to clear them. In a press conference, al-Qusaybi said that the militia are currently planting more advanced and dangerous mines compared to last year's. He added that the project lost 3 of experts during the last month and that the mines currently scattered on the west coast and Shabwa are controlled remotely. He stressed that the mines used by the Houthi militia aim to kill both humans and animals, indicating that Masan lost 28 of its employees and 33 wounded, some of them seriously. The project removed about 300,000 mines and explosive devices within 3 years.
نحن اليوم نزعنا أكثر من 300,000 لغم.
Massam project engineering teams have cleared out about 300,000 mines and explosive devices across Yemen since 2018. This number only entitles to Massam efforts. There are other large quantities of mines that have been demined by other projects. This reveals the large amount of mines that Houthi militia have planted.
To Shabwa, the engineering teams of the Giant Brigades continue to clear areas of Houthi planted mines and unexploded ordnance in Bayhan. Sources reported that the Giant's engineering teams demining large numbers of mines planted by Houthi rebels in roads in front of homes, schools, and farms. In Hodeidah, a citizen was killed due to an explosion of a Houthi mine. Local sources reported to Yemen Today that Samir Abdullah was killed in a mine explosion in Hais while he was riding his motorcycle to visit his relatives. Sources added that citizens transferred the deceased into the medical center of the Giant's 7th Brigade. Thousands of Houthis planted landmines and improvised explosive devices are killing and maiming civilians in Yemen. Incidents are documented every single day. Of those tragic incidents is the story of the couple Rabab and Naji, whose family reunion was kidnapped by a Houthi mine. Rabab died while she was driving to meet her husband. The following report has more details on this.
Mines in Yemen continue to sweep lives of innocent civilians. These mines killed hopes of family reunion of Rabab and Naji after the Houthi prisons separated them. Naji was a victim of a trap set by Houthis as he received a call from a person telling him that a businessman would provide 90 food baskets and had to come to receive them and distribute them to those who deserved it, only to be surprised when he reached the exact location that it was just a call from the Houthis.
The arrest happened on June 28, 2017. I received a call from an anonymous person stating that there are 90 food baskets that will be distributed to the displaced people of Makha because I work in humanitarian relief. I went to the agreed upon location, and when I first got there, I called the guy. Then I discovered that they are from Houthis National Security. They told me that there is an arrest warrant against me.
When Naji Muhammad began working in the humanitarian field, the number of displaced people had increased in the area. Therefore, after his marriage to Rabab, he continued his humanitarian assistance efforts since the Houthis invaded the capital Sana'a and expanded to the rest of the governorates. After 10 months of enforced disappearance, Naji was allowed to communicate with his family, and for the first time and for 5 minutes while he was blindfolded, Naji called his wife Rabab and told her that he was alive and that he was in Houthi prison, that he was not allowed to locate it. When Rabab received the call from her husband, hope grew inside of her and she returned to life after the despair of knowing his fate, and this gave her a motivation to move in order to get him out of prison. With great joy, Rabab spent the night drawing in her mind the moments of the meeting.
I told her that visits are allowed, but I did not allow her to come due to the distance and risks. She said, I don't care about the distance, I'll come to the place where you are if they allowed me to visit you.
On her way to see Naji, a mine exploded and killed Rabab. Rabab died and her husband remained behind bars, suffering the bitterness of prison, adding to the suffering of losing his wife. It did not stop here. When Naji's wife died, it was hard for him to go visit her grave, as the area was under the Houthi control. Naji had to wait until November 25 of the year 2021, when finally the area was liberated, to go and visit Rabab's grave.
In the West Coast, the Joint Forces destroyed an operations room and targeted Houthi militia, inflicting human losses on them in Taiz and Hodeidah. The military media of the Joint Forces reported that Houthi rebels suffered deaths and injuries. On the same front, a combat vehicle was destroyed and 4 militia fighters on board were killed. In Hais, the artillery of the Joint Forces targeted Houthi militias on the outskirts of Jabal Ras, south of Al-Jarrahi. Turning to Ma'arib, the government forces backed by resistance continue advancing on the southern fronts. Military sources indicated that the government forces attacked Houthi rebels' fortifications on several fronts and inflicted heavy losses among them. The sources indicated that clashes are focused on the vicinity of Rish Camp, Mal'a Mountains and Ramla front east of Al-Balak. The coalition announced that its operations resulted in the killing of 19 militants and the destruction of 11 military vehicles following 19 air operations in the city. Moving to Saada, the government forces regain new areas in Al Safra district. A military source reported that the government forces regain new sites in Al Naqa area, indicating that the battles resulted with heavy losses among the militia. Coming next. The future of Yemeni children is unknown as the conflict continues.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما أخرج المندوب إحنا شبكينا ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما إحنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. 7 years into catastrophic war that sparked the world's worst humanitarian crisis, Yemen's conflict shows no signs of ending soon, and the future of an entire generation is at risk. About 3 million children are unable to attend school, according to the Red Cross, with 8.1 million needing urgent educational assistance. This report has more details.
Years of fighting mean children as old as 10 have never been to school. Their classroom has no roof, no seats, no desks. Most of the 50 small children sitting on the rubble-strewn floor have no pens or paper. But the students in this makeshift school in Hais, a village in Yemen's Hodeida province, are still among the luckiest in the country, simply for having a teacher and a place to learn. Schools are destroyed, homes are destroyed, years go by, and there is still no chance to get a proper education. There is a huge pressure to leave school to work to support the family. Some children in Yemen are now 10 years old, and they've never had the chance to enroll in any school. If families do not have money for food or medicine and hospital fees, how can they afford education expenses? 16.2 million people, around half the population, are food insecure, and fluctuating pockets of famine-like conditions have left nearly 2.3 million children under the age of 5 acutely malnourished. Weakened immune systems also make infants liable to Yemen's devastating outbreaks of cholera and dengue fever. Most people say COVID-19 is the least of their concerns. Yemeni childhoods are ending earlier and earlier. The average age of marriage for girls in some rural areas was just 14, even before the conflict broke out, and has only dropped since, while boys as young as 11 are recruited to fight by parties on all sides of the complex conflict. Most of the children getting basic literacy and numeracy lessons in Hais had already been displaced from other areas, as families attempt to flee the fighting. According to UNICEF, the warring parties have attacked schools at least 231 times since March 2015. Civil servant salaries in some areas haven't been paid in several years, meaning many teachers and doctors effectively continue to work for free. While Yemen has about 170,000 teachers across primary and secondary schools, about 2/3 do not receive regular salaries. The teachers say that even though they don't have salaries and the conditions are harsh, they feel there is a responsibility to keep working. If they leave education, they know the disaster would be even greater. If the war continues, children in Yemen will not be able to have a better future. It has to end.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization said that 72% of reported Yemeni families cited a decline in their income during the period of July and September 2021. In Aden, Damar, Hajjah, Lahj, Raima, and Sana'a governorates, more than 4 in 5 households reported a decrease in their main income source. The organization said that skyrocketing food and fuel prices are particularly challenging for a population that relies heavily on imports as its food staples. Health system in Yemen has become extremely weakened after 7 years of war, especially in healthy controlled areas. About half of the health facilities in the country are out of service, while many of the functioning hospitals have limited capacities. Disease outbreaks in recent years have put the already collapsed health system in chaos. The following report has more details.
Not a day passes in Yemen without hundreds of new infections being announced, with a number of diseases and epidemics that are spreading rapidly in the healthy controlled areas, in the complete absence of precautionary and medical measures that reduce the chances of infection spreading among the innocent, and even in the absence of many hospitals, which have been completely out of service, either for lack of capabilities or for converting them into military camps serving the Houthis. The rates of outbreaks of 5 epidemic diseases increased in healthy controlled areas to include fever, measles, and cholera in addition to the coronavirus. The Houthi militia is facing accusations of over the high rates of epidemic outbreaks in the governorates under their control, without serious action to confront the health crisis, which leads to the spread of epidemics on a larger scale without being able to determine the size of the epidemic. With the coronavirus outbreak all over the world, Yemen is suffering severely to help people survive with poor medical equipment and a corrupt health system. How can people survive in Yemen with all this chaos caused by the Houthi militia? No one really knows the answer to this sad situation.
In Hadramaut, the United Nations Development Programme introduced the solar hybrid system that will provide an uninterrupted power supply to the central COVID-19 isolation unit in Sayoun. Anis Haidid, the hospital's director, said that the solar hybrid solution has reduced the cost of electricity by $17,500 a year. In addition, the system can help run 10 ventilators, several machines, and 17 air conditioners. The National Committee recorded 78 new positive cases of COVID-19 and 1 death, as the largest announced so far in several months, in an indication of a 4th new wave of the pandemic. The new cases were recorded in Hadramaut, El Dala, Ma'rib, Aden, Shabwa, Socotra, Taiz, Lahj, and El Mahra. This brings the number of positive cases to 10,485, including 1,995 deaths and 7,051 cases of recovery. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. The U.S. President Joe Biden says he considers redesignating Houthi militia as terrorist organization. Hans Grunberg concludes visit to Riyadh after intensive discussions with Saudi and Yemeni officials aimed at de-escalation. Houthi mines continue to claim thousands of civilian lives in the country. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. This is Rushain Fouad. Thank you for watching.